to I'm just going to record the rest of this. So if we lose each other again, we've got something to say.
So I'll say got it. Okay. All right. Well, that was fun. I found myself suddenly ad-libbing.
You were very good.
I thought talking to myself and thinking, shush.
That's the sign of a a very seriously experienced actress. When you stand on stage and you say, anyway, I don't know what's happened there.
Wasn't it Shakespeare, National Shakespeare Day or something a couple of days ago? So, yes, I now look all frazzled.
So apologies for that. But anyway, let's continue with what we were talking about. And I've still got some loads of questions I want to ask you. I don't want to make this too deep at all. I mean, as you could tell from my review, that I absolutely adored the book. And there seemed to be so much to say, and another quote to kind of, well, I need to put that in, and I need to put that in. It was just such a powerful book. And I wanted to just talk to you a bit about the concept of a moral conscience, because, I mean, people who have a moral conscience, it urges them to choose right between wrong, and that's absolutely fine, difference between good and evil. But how can you, and I think you mentioned that anyway, how can you reconcile a moral conscience when you know that whichever one you choose will put your family and friends' lives in jeopardy? How do you attempt to reconcile that?
I don't know. I often ask myself the question, what would I have done? And would I have been able to do what they did? And I don't think you really know until you're in that situation. You'd like to think that you'd
do the right thing.
You'd do the right thing. But then, I mean, he wasn't, my own Italian grandfather-in-law wasn't a young man when he helped the resistance. He already had 2 children. And there was my mother-in-law told me that there was an occasion when he brought a partisan back to their flat to hide for the night. And they lived dead opposite in Urbino, the headquarters in Urbino of the German officers. And his wife went berserk. She said, he can't stay here. He can't stay here. We've got children. It's too dangerous. So I think she let him stay that night. And then Gigi, they used to call Luigi, Gigi found somewhere else for him to hide. And it's just, and it's one thing hiding a fugitive in a cave or in a cellar, but in your own flat opposite where Germans are billeted. And there was this isn't the same thing, but Mama told us as well that one day she was sitting on the terrace of their house, the roof terrace, and a German from across the way tried to climb the stairs to get at her, but her cousins were living there as well, and they managed to get rid of this soldier. So living in an occupied city and then acting as a resistance fighter, he wasn't in full battle dress or anything, but he was doing things quietly and undercover, but very, very dangerous. I don't really know the answer to your question. I suppose it depends on the sort of person you are. He was very principled.
It seemed to me that when you do the story, aren't you? You're the narrator of the story, and you can't sort of have your own opinions in the book. You can't. We know this happened. We know this is history, and you can't impose on your opinions or on anybody else. But it felt to me that by choosing certain characters and looking at the choices that they made, reflected on how you felt about them and their moral conscience.
Well, I suppose you're thinking about Enrico
Yeah,
and Sabrina,
yeah.
and there were people who just looked after themselves, really.
Which
And I
is your
hope I won't be
way
like.
of you know, I mean, even when you describe them, there's something in the language that you choose, and it makes me think that you, as the narrator, you didn't really approve of what they did. You'd much rather, you know, you want to expand
Yeah,
on the ones that helped. I don't know.
well, I think everybody likes a hero.
Yeah,
Um, and we want good to prevail, don't we?
yeah, of course.
But
Yeah.
and I got one comment from one reviewer about Devorah's character, because she is infatuated with Enrico, and I don't want to give too much away. Sometimes I think reviews do give too much away. I think it's
Right.
quite hard to find the right way of describing a book without rewriting the story in a summary. And yours was brilliant, but there have been some that told the story, which is a shame because the reader hasn't read the book yet.
No,
But
no.
she's a young girl. I can remember being infatuated with people that I shouldn't have been infatuated with for silly reasons. I hadn't grown up yet. And so I wanted to show that flawed characters as well.
Yeah.
That flawed, and nobody likes a goody goody. I mean,
No.
I know, I hear what you're saying. You mustn't dictate morals, but when you write about characters, you get inside their heads, and you have to put down on the page what they are like. And yeah, I like good over evil, but
Yeah.
I don't like a goody goody.
It
So
was almost like subconsciously
mhm.
you were, you know, some of the words that she had and the way that she treated her friend, and
Mhm.
it was almost like subconsciously, I don't like this character much,
No,
really. You know,
no,
she's very flaky, you know,
yes,
she's just going to befriend, you know, the right people at the right time to get the most out of the war.
yeah.
Um,
Well, there are people like that, aren't there?
yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there
I'm
are people
absolutely
like
sure.
that. The people who slept with the enemy because it got them
Yeah,
an extra
absolutely.
ham. But
Absolutely.
then if your family's starving, hers wasn't, her family wasn't starving. But I don't want to be judgmental either,
No,
because I
no,
don't know what I would have done. But
no.
there were women who slept with the enemy because they got starving children at home. So, you know, there's that side as well.
As a writer, is it difficult not to impose any of your own beliefs or morals when you're writing a book? How impartial do you think you are?
Well, I think because another theme is religion,
Mm,
and I was brought up as a Roman Catholic,
yeah.
and quite a strict Roman Catholic home, and I have my ideas about religion, and I think some of them went into Devorah's
Mm,
opinions,
mm,
because that was another thing. I mean, there were Jewish people who fought, there were Jewish men who'd fought in the First World War for Italy, and they got put in prison. I don't know. I find religion very tricky,
yeah.
and so some of the comments in my books, in the character via the characters, are probably very personal. But then, if you're not invested in what you're writing, then I don't know. I can't write something if I don't care about
No,
it, to be
no.
honest.
I mean, I know you mentioned about the Catholic Church, you know, the Pope, his
Yeah.
silence on the fate of millions, millions of Jews.
Mm-hmm.
And yet we know that many Jews were in fact hidden in the churches
Yes.
and the convents.
Yeah.
Um,
I think there's been a lot of bad press about
yeah,
the Catholic Church
yeah,
and the Pope's position on not coming. But he kept quiet, other people believe, so that they could get on with their protection of people. There were so many Jewish people and refugees harbored by convents and monasteries, and yeah, Assisi in particular was full of Jewish evacuees and people hiding. They had a really strong underground. I was nearly tempted to change the venue to Assisi, but then I thought, no, I want to write about Urbino because it's more personal. There's so many stories out there waiting to be told.
Yeah. How did you find this particular story affected you emotionally? Could you just say, well, that's 3 pages done today? Or were you just reaching for some tissues thinking, I've this is all going round in my head now. I can't, I'm trying to process it yourself almost.
I think I found this the hardest book to write.
Yeah. To do it justice.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
And I was terrified that I wasn't knowledgeable enough about the Jewish religion, and partly that's why I made the family a non-practicing family, because that happened as well. It happens of course. In all religions. You're baptized into a certain church, or the tradition is a religious tradition, but it's not something that goes really, really deep, so it gives you an identity, but it's not something that's in every single part of your mind and body. So I was worried about that. I had to do a lot of research and reading. Yes, I did.
So you feel this book of all of the ones that you've done sort of really kind of challenged you the most as a writer to tell this story. Yeah.
And in fact, I've got another book on the go, and I feel quite still feel quite drained from writing.
I can imagine. I can imagine.
So yes, it was, and I kept saying to Morris, "Oh, I don't think this is good enough. I don't think," and he likes it. He thinks it's the best one, but that's it. But that's up to the reader to decide, isn't it? And we'll see. It's got a bestseller sticker already,
right?
Which is quite gratifying, I have to say.
It is. It's I loved it. I really, really did. And I think that
thank you.
One of we just had a writing retreat in England, as you know, and one of the things that my co-host was saying, one of the questions was, I don't know if you agree with it or not, once you've finished your book, what's the next thing that you do? And nobody got the answer. Nobody, we couldn't work out what that could possibly be. And she said that what you do when you've finished your book is that you go back and you write the first line of the book.
Of the new book or the old
one that you've just done? You go back and you do that so that you can then set the scene for what is about to come. You set the scene for the reader, and it's basically, once you've finished it, you go back and you do your first sentence as a hook. And yours, when I look at yours, and you've got about the photograph, the faded black and white photograph dated 1930 something, how did you do that? Did you go back and write that?
Well, to be honest,
if I'm really interested,
I actually wrote the last chapter first, because I knew how I wanted it to end.
You wrote, right, okay.
But it changed, because I can remember I'd gone on a writing retreat, and you were supposed to, or if you wanted to, you could talk to the tutor, who was Rosanna Lay, by the way. She's wonderful. She would accept a section of the work that you were working on, and I hadn't really started it properly. And then I wrote the last chapter, which did change a bit, but that got me into, I very often I don't write the beginning and until the end. That first the first chapter you're talking about
Yeah,
is something I actually did do towards the end.
Go back. And what made you think, I'm going to start this with the photograph then? And then, you know,
well, because I wanted to, in the book, I wanted to also show how people change.
Yeah.
And so if you present them as they are halfway through almost their life, what am I trying to say? I wanted to show how they develop. So showing them as older people at the end was important to me to show how they developed. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, it's almost like the book sort of challenged you on every level, really, didn't it? You know, from creative writing to religion to politics. It's almost like it was just pulling so much out of you as a person. And I think when that happens, you end up with quite a masterpiece, don't you, really?
Oh, well, I don't think it's a masterpiece.
Oh,
but
I do. I think this is an incredible book. I mean, it's
that's very kind of you, Wendy. I think it's so difficult to be objective about your own work.
I guess so.
Really.
But you know, the story of it, and it was lovely that you had the bit at the back about, you know, finding these treasures in the medal, and how you really wanted this book to be this homage to the Italians, to the compassion. I think that emotional side just draws the reader in. It's not that you've just sat there and thought, well, here's the plot, let's go for it. There is so much personal.
Yes, well, Morris, when Nonno died, and now his auntie who's died, who looked after Nonno, grandfather in Italian, there was lots to sort out: furniture, documents. I mean, this is an aside, but some of his most prized possessions are a set of horseshoes that he found in the garden that were going to be chucked out, and that they turned out to be his great grandfather's horseshoes that he'd made and had won competitions for as a what do you call it? What's the person who makes horseshoes? Maniscalco in Italian, a blacksmith. He was blacksmith.
Yeah.
So there were loads of things that he kept finding, and then he found this box of correspondence, because Nonno was a very meticulous man, and he'd kept loads of correspondence, including a letter he'd written to Mussolini himself, complaining that his wife was ill and that he needed some extra funds, and various things. There were postcards from a friend of his who was in prisoner of war in Africa, which we've given a lot of these things to the professor because he wanted to write a book himself. But then this medal in the middle of a pile of papers, and that he was awarded by the government for being an active partisan, a partigiano combattente. I've seen Morris in tears several times, because he's very, very proud of his grandfather, and he made little frames for all our children with a picture of Nonno in it, and an explanation of what he'd done in the war behind, because and there must be thousands of stories like this that just get forgotten because somebody has a bonfire when somebody dies and throws the papers out.
I mean, after the book, I just wanted to do such a lot of reading myself, really, because I was just blown away by the story of it. You know, I mean, coming across, there was one story about a Jewish father who had 5 daughters, and he had them all baptized so that, you know, they would be safe. You know.
Oh yes, that happened as well.
You just can't imagine the scale, really, can you?
No.
And how everything suddenly changed. I mean, I was looking at something this morning, and it was saying that the Italian Jews had really they'd behaved no differently to any other Jews, to fascism. That they'd followed Mussolini,
Yes.
they'd participated in the March on Rome.
Yes. Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
they were registered members of the fascist
Yeah,
party, and
yeah.
at that point it was like that moment when suddenly
Mm,
everything changed,
mm.
like a complete curtain came down,
Yes,
and
yeah.
suddenly they were undesirables, they
Mhm,
were
mhm.
people to got rid of. It's a moment in history that we no,
We can't imagine it,
we
can
can't
we?
imagine, we can't be
And
proud of it, we can't imagine it really.
no,
And
and how you
yeah,
can't. That's why I've got Devora. She can never let go of her
no,
anger about
no,
it.
no.
She can't. I read. Oh, my memory's terrible, but I read so many books
Yeah.
written by Jewish people about their experiences, and I think I mentioned it in the back, the name of the book,
Yeah,
written
you
by
do
a
actually.
grandmother
Yeah, you
and a
do.
grandson, or is it maybe a great grandmother and her great grandson? They wrote it together during COVID. She was a Hungarian Jewess, but that was just incredible how she survived. I mean, there's thank goodness these people are writing, oh, writing their stories. And I'm sorry, I'm waffling on because I
Yeah,
can't
no, no,
remember.
no,
I'm
no.
into another book at the moment, and so
That must be. Do you try
uh,
and do, is it what you do, you try and consciously do one a year then? Does it take so much out of you? You wouldn't want
well,
to do any more than one a year.
I, mm, I have actually decided to have a break after I've
Right.
finished this next one
Okay.
because I don't want to become stale and just
No.
feeling I'm churning books out. And so that's been a decision I've come to recently. So because I know I know I don't want to be formulaic. I'm already known as a woman who's written books about Italy in the Second World War.
Mm.
I want to see whether I can write something else. I don't know yet, you see.
Well, I'm sure you can. I mean, we were talking about genres last
Yes.
week, and I think we kind of came to the conclusion that if you have the creative tools to
Mhm.
write, that should really equip you to write in any genre. So it will be really interesting, won't it, for all of us to see where it'll either, what will it be, Angela, a rom-com or chick lit or
Well, I have
contemporary
written
fiction.
one book which is completely different, as you probably remember, called Mavis and Dot. And
Yes,
I
yeah,
quite like to get back
back
to, I've
to
got a quarter of a book about Mavis and Dot
yeah,
written.
yeah.
And I also used to like writing short stories. I think
Yes,
I've got a
yeah,
short story. Um, I don't know when it's going to be published, but that's been bought as well. So I just need a bit of a break from the
yeah,
Second World War.
yeah.
It is quite harrowing what you find out. The other I didn't like history at school, but
Didn't you?
this has got no. I had an awful history teacher, very boring, who you just used to write notes on the board that we had to copy down. I think the way history is taught now is amazing, where students have to reason and give their opinions and think what would have happened if that didn't happen. We didn't have any of that. But in my research for The Girl Who Escaped, I went to find Villa Oliveto because I wanted to know whether the internment camps were the same everywhere in Italy, or whether this was just southern Italy that I'd read about in Elizabeth Bettina's book. So I looked up Villa Oliveto. No, I looked up internment camps in Tuscany, and I found this picture of Villa Oliveto, and that it was a place where archives were kept about the camp. So I thought, "Ooh, jolly good,
Oh
we'll go
gosh,
there."
hackles at
But
the back of the
I
neck.
know. So it's
Wow.
quite near Arezzo,
Yes,
which is
yes,
beautiful anyway.
yes,
So
yes.
we found it up a little road. I mean, I've used it in the book, but it was shut,
Mm.
and the archives weren't kept there anymore.
Oh.
So we just walked around the building. There's nobody around. And it's in a little hamlet, which was semi-deserted. There was a lady walking past, so I'd asked her, oh, do you know anything about this place? No, I don't live here. I'm just up here cleaning a holiday house. So then I saw a couple of notices on the gate, one about the fact that it was where the archives were kept, but I found out they aren't anymore. And then there was a very faded plaque, a stone plaque, which talked about Villa Oliveto being a place where Polish and English subjects had been imprisoned. British Jewish and Polish Jewish subjects had been imprisoned. And I thought, what would Jewish, English Jews, British Jews be in a place like this?
Yeah, exactly.
I couldn't understand. And so, and it said Libya, British Libyan Jews. That's right. That's how I got it started. And I thought, I just don't understand this at all. And then researching, I of course, Libya was a colony, an Italian colony at the time. And so that sent me off on another track. And the character called Shira was born from that.
Yes. Oh, right.
And that complicated, very complicated history of the of Libya and the Jewish persecution there. And the British conquered Benghazi in 1941, I think it was, 1941. And then the Germans and Italians kicked them out. But while the British were in Libya, they abolished the racial laws, and they gave British citizenship to a lot of the Libyans, because some of the Libyan Jews became soldiers for the British. So there was all this other
stuff
side which
on.
you didn't know. And I read about the way they were treated in Libya, and that was awful. So although, I mean, I don't want to make it like a fairy story. It's not that there wasn't discrimination from the Italians. And I was reading an article yesterday about how a lot of things were covered up about the discrimination in Italy, and it's coming out now. But nevertheless, they were amazing. And that sentence, sono cristiani come noi, keeps coming up. They're Christians like us, and Italians don't mean Christian.
No, they're human. They're humans like you. I mean, you did the most wonderful promo videos of walking through the town. This is the city wall. This is where she would have walked. This is the ghetto, where they would just, it places it. It really does. It gave the reader, I think, such a sense of location. And over there, that's where she would have done the fencing, you know, that they were lovely. They were absolutely superb.
Oh, thank you. Well,
I think you had such a lot of effort to do that, you know, for the reader. Brilliant.
It helped me as well, because I hadn't written the whole book by then. No,
was this last year then when you recorded?
Yes.
Though? That's right.
And this next month, well, in 3 weeks' time, we're going to Sicily, because my next book is set in Sicily. And that's where I do know Sicily as well, and that has a personal attachment, because I'm worked there and I met my husband there, and we lived there before we got married. So, but I will do the same there. Even though I'm only two-thirds of the way through the book, and somehow walking through Urbino, which I know that well too, because we got married there. But walking through the ghetto and seeing the conditions and the low doors and the walls. helped
Visually,
me write it.
absolutely. Those pesky swallows, weren't they noisy?
Oh, I love them though. That's very Italian. The
I
swifts,
was trying
yeah.
to strain to hear you through the noise of the swallow circling around, but you know, those city walls and down the steps, and this is where she would have, you know, and this was the synagogue. That really is such a lovely, lovely touch for the reader. They really are. That's so nice.
Well, I enjoyed it. The synagogue's not used anymore because there aren't enough. There aren't many Jews. There's only a couple in Urbino, but the lady who let us in and showed us around and answered my inane questions was lovely. And then I think she warmed to us, and she invited us back to her house. And then I got that little snippet about how, first of all, because it was a lovely house. And that's often the way you walk outside these Italian palazzi in cities and they look quite scruffy, but when you go inside, they are amazing buildings. And she said, oh, this was requisitioned first by the Germans, so we had to move out. And then when the British came, they requisitioned it as well. And she said to me, and they burnt some of the books in our library because it was very cold that winter. I felt really guilty. I apologized. But, you know, little anecdotes like that really do help.
And that's where Devora was doing the cleaning. You used that as the location.
Yes,
it came together really nicely, I think, didn't it? It really did as a book.
Well, that's lovely to hear.
Oh, really powerful, really powerful. My goodness, you know, if there was ever a film to be made for something like that, you know, a case for a film, that would be amazing.
Well, I've been very lucky because Bookouture, my publisher, have managed to, they sold the rights of my first book to an Italian publisher, and that came out in Italy. I really hope this book will get taken on, because as I say at the beginning, I've written it in honor of Italians, really. If that doesn't sound too la-di-la, because they are such lovely
homage to them, to every Italian family that helped somebody during the war, a Jewish family. It doesn't. It doesn't. It really does. I think I mean, isn't it wonderful that somehow we can repay the generosity, the bravery, the compassion of the Italians? You can anyway, by writing a book like this. And hopefully, because people are buying it, we're doing the same, aren't we, really? So
well, there have been a couple of comments from an American reviewers to say that they've never read anything about the war in Italy. They've read novels set in France, but they haven't read books set in Italy in the war. So they were very interested in that. So it's like spreading the word. It is.
It absolutely is. It's a beautiful book, Angela, and it was a privilege to read it and review it. It really was. It was you know, sometimes you just want, it's like a film, isn't it? Sometimes you just want to watch a film that's just goes over your head. It's just a bit of fluff. And then sometimes it's nice to watch a film or read a book that has such an impact on you. I don't know what it is. It just makes the, you know, makes the hairs at the back of your neck stand up, doesn't it? You know, when you read it.
I haven't got an agent. Will you be my agent?
Oh no, it was wonderful. Anyway, on that note, thank you so much for doing this. And I apologize again. I don't know what happened or who those interlopers were who were doing another live on Facebook.
We ought to call ourselves the Riddlinian Pet Show, you know. Everything there's a certain order, but not everything in the right order. Something like that.
You know, when you went on to read, I don't know, that was very clever, because I couldn't hear that. I'm going, Angela, stop! I'm here, but you can hear me. So I don't know what happened, but who cares? It was just so lovely to talk to you, and
thank you.
Have a wonderful time in Italy.
And I hope that your retreat in Abruzzo goes well, because I went on. That's where we last met, isn't it?
I know.
In southern Italy. at your retreat.
What I'd love to do, and it probably sounds a really crazy idea, but now that I'm kind of connecting with so many authors who have written about Italy and set books in Italy, it would be lovely to have a writers' conference set in Italy somewhere, so that, you know, we can get people in to talk like you about your historical fiction, and then people can, you know, like the Harrogate Crime Writers
Yes,
Festival
all
or
right.
something like that. But this is going to be the Italian Writers Festival, so we can get everybody out to Italy. But thank you again for your time, and I really appreciate it. I really do.
Thank you for inviting me.
And lots of love to you and Morris. And
thank you.
hope
And tell
he
my
recovers
husband not to
well.
fall out of any more trees.
Ciao.
Bye. Ciao,
Buonasera.
ciao,
Ciao,
ciao.
ciao.